Basically, just a few days ago, China's foreign ministry said that previous Grander's allegations on the Xinjiang cotton, rather ironically, have only made the cotton more sought after and in greater demand, as their latest export figures suggested. Then it suddenly occurred to me, while I was in Xinjiang shooting real-life videos there, to dispel this pathetic ongoing propaganda, why now take this opportunity to expose the real puppet master behind the whole setup, namely the one and only Better Cotton Initiative, BCI, one of your most beloved NGOs. In order to discover the true extent of this grand puppet show, I did some extra homework with my extensive research capabilities on both domestic and overseas websites. All this hard work has paid off, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm finally able to piece together all the clues and uncover the underlying logic and motives embedded in his well-articulated storylines from both domestic and international sources, with the sole aim of tarnishing the reputation of the Xinjiang cotton. Hello everybody, in case you've just tuned into my channel, this is your sexy Siley. It's been 3 long months since the height of the Xinjiang cotton propaganda in the Western media. Let's take a step back and find out who's this well-hidden grand puppet master behind the scene. Based on the information gathered on the BCI website, we can clearly see they're trying their hardest to spread among its Western audience, i.e. ill-informed you and me, the idea that the Xinjiang cotton was made by forced labour. However, on close inspection, it's relatively easy to pertain that, following the money trail, its agenda wouldn't fall far from the ideals and wishes of its founder, the US Agency for International Developments, USAID. No surprise here we see one of China's best friends, the US, involved, and once again sending out generous foreign aid to the people of China. But since I'm not an idiot, I refocused my efforts in finding some key information conveniently left out by the BCI. So what was the BCI hiding from us? Well, let's wind back the clock to 3 months ago, when discussions on the Xinjiang cotton issue reached its apex on the 24th and 25th of March. This is when I had my first suspicion. As far back as on the 1st of March, the BCI Shanghai branch, let's not forget guys, these are the actual people working in China for the BCI, they stated through their official WeChat public accounts that the agency representing BCI, of course, has not discovered one single incident of forced labour in China. This was further backed up by details released during an exclusive interview with China Central Television Network, revealing the fact that they had sent 2 separate investigatory reports to BCI headquarters, along with independent and objective reports from third-party agencies, all of which came to the conclusion that no forced labour related issue were found. Despite overwhelming reports from both its in-house and third-party agencies specifying no such forced labour was found, the BCI chose to ignore all of them in favour of this third and final report, contradicting all previous reports they've been doing themselves. Therein lies my second suspicion. Why did the BCI settle on a third report that just happened to confirm forced labour allegations despite previous contradictions? Furthermore, where did this third report come from? To get to the bottom of this, I knew I needed to dig deeper. As usual, I started off by searching the council members of the BCI. Among its members, rather shocking, there used to be this Chinese company. However, due to China's consistent and solid stance towards BCI, as well as the biased favour of the United States by the BCI's president, the company was forced to resign from BCI Council. Something tells me something seriously fishy is going on here. Upon further research, I found out the BCI has set up this expert task force on forced labour and decent work to determine whether forced labour or human rights violations existed during cotton production process in Xinjiang back in April 2020. Let's give them the benefit of doubt here for now and assume they are genuinely concerned and care for the well-beings of your average Chinese workers. Soon after, in June 2020, these caring white knights organised a meeting inviting other notorious NGOs such as the UHRP, the infamous Uyghur Human Rights Project, to discuss the issues in Xinjiang, totally disregarding the BCI's own previous report and taking the UHRP's words as God's gospel. While it's lovely to see all these NGOs coming together and having a whale of a time for a good laugh, it's important to note that these NGOs are definitely not for profits, as they have No need for turning a profit when they are being handed cash by the US Foreign Aid Department. No surprise, its headquarters is also based in Washington, D.C. For a quick calculation, between 2016 and 2019, the US National Endowment for Democracy, NED, the notorious anti-China vanguard, alone had offered up to $1.2 million to UHRP. So guys, what objective and concrete conclusions would you expect coming out of the mouths of these dubious NGOs? It came as no surprise then that the BCI made the decision to halt the use of Xinjiang cotton upon hearing these foolproof evidence from our China-loving NGOs. But hang on, who gave you the authority to outright ban and effectively kill off the entire livelihoods of millions of Xinjiang cotton workers? It is very kind of the BCI to list their sources of origin on their official websites, whether it's Responsible Purchase Network, Fair Labor Association, Human Rights Watch, Adidas, Nike, etc. Once again, all lovely bunch of NGOs or companies appear to be very concerned for the well-being of the people in Xinjiang. Take Fair Labor Association for instance. They gave the notorious report previously titled Forced Labor Risk in Xinjiang, China. And this is nothing compared to the Human Rights Watch, the president of whom was explicitly sanctioned by China's foreign ministry. Guys, check out how hard these guys are working for the collective goal and their tireless efforts in helping the people of Xinjiang. On the contrary, Adidas actually dispatched 2 separate teams to Xinjiang to investigate these claims, and unlike those keen NGOs, Adidas chose silence upon hearing the results of their dispatch. I wonder why that's the case. During the height of disinformation campaign, while the Chinese condemned and boycotted H&M for their quick statement banning all Xinjiang cotton in their supply chain, Nike was the real slimy one, in that they too whipped out a statement condemning Xinjiang cotton, only to have now made the site inaccessible. However, I still managed to uncover the records from Internet Archives. In addition, in the so-called statements on forced labour, human trafficking and modern slavery, I also discovered a new name, Verity. They have co-founded a project with Nike which specialises in conducting due diligence on forced labour among its suppliers. It's no coincidence that the incumbent CEO of Verity turned out to be a board member of Responsible Purchasing Network, and what's more, he once served as director of standard at Fair Labor Association. These guys just simply hop from one NGO to the next. Speaking of revolving door guys, this might be the only way of ensuring consistency in the ideology across many NGOs. Now let's take a deep dive into this organisation Verity, which claims itself to provide tools to help enterprises eliminate labour abuse. Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Everybody, let's take a guess whether it's an NGO. I have this strong feeling more secrets will be revealed about this organisation if I just keep digging. So I started by researching the founder of Verity. This witch has spared no effort in vilifying China, focusing exclusively on sensitive issues like Hong Kong, Taiwan, Tibet and Xinjiang. She has also secretly spent nearly 3 years in China and filmed a so-called human rights themed documentary. You can simply imagine how twisted the contents are based on the scenes of this movie, which bear resemblance to BBC's notorious Hell filter to defame China. I didn't bother to delve into the contents because lots of the scenes were filmed through hidden cameras. In a nutshell, the main star featured in this documentary has been living and working in Europe and has even got promoted in the NGO. Sounds like an easy immigration pathway to me, to a rich country. Since its founder is so keen on China, Verity must have established Chinese local office, but as I went on to find more about the team members, the official website was not publishing details of any of its overseas employees, citing protection of privacy. As my intervention got into a stalemate, it suddenly occurred to me that Verity might also have set up its own WeChat public account, just like its NGO peer, BCI China. Apparently, my gut instinct was correct. While I did find one such public account, the registration body was listed as Shenzhen Verity Supply Chain Management Co. Isn't it ridiculous that a so-called non-for-profit organisation is registered as a for-profit company in China? But I'll have to admit, I'm impressed by Verity's impeccable foresight, because back in 2017, China enacted the law of the People's Republic of China on the administration of activities of overseas non-governmental organisations within the territory of China, which laid out a very clear set of rules on overseas NGOs. Public security departments of all levels are supervisors of this type of NGOs. Simply put, All actions of these NGOs should abide by rules of the local regulators, and activities should be filed on record in advance. Only this one clause of disclosing sources of funding used in events can effectively prevent ill-intentioned NGOs from fulfilling their evil deeds. So Verity chose to set up a company to circumvent these rules and dispatched Yao Wenjian, its Chinese representative, to set up this company. Apparently, Verity has made full use of their Chinese experts to investigate on topics like the so-called forced labour in Xinjiang on behalf of BCI. However, they have not dispatched a single person to conduct on-site investigations. On the contrary, they collected an army of anti-China materials through internet searches from the US Congress, Human Rights Watch, and World Uyghur Congress to draw invincible conclusions. By now, you should already be aware who is responsible for that third and most crucial report. With the backing of this report, the BCI seemed to have gained confidence, and its Director of Standards for the BCI, Damien Sanfilippo, told the BBC in an interview, "We've identified the risk that the poor rural communities in Xinjiang would be coerced into employment linked to this poverty alleviation program." Excuse me? What sort of nonsense is this? There is an old saying in Chinese, goes, "You simply cannot fake authenticity." Even John Sudworth, a BBC reporter, who has embarrassingly rushed to hide in China's Taiwan province less than 2 months after writing a lie-ridden piece on Xinjiang, and now facing the wrath of local Xinjiang cotton farmers whose economic livelihoods was put at risk by his biased reporting, even he's having a guilty conscience. What about Verity and the hardship it has caused for the people in Xinjiang reliant on local cotton trade? Impressed by Verity's precise and speedy attack on the Xinjiang cotton trade, I wonder if Verity has done this before many times. Turns out I was correct. He has a long taken a stance in forced labour regarding China, and notably Xinjiang. For instance, the geographical area of China is marked red in a cotton map on Verity's US website, which indicates the existence of so-called forced labour and child labour. So now let's do a quick recap. The BCI, a not-for-profit organisation which relies on membership fees to stay afloat, rather irrationally and quickly desperate to abandon the world's largest cotton market. Also, it liaised with another seemingly unrelated and therefore objective NGO, Verity, to produce a damning report on the Xinjiang cotton. How is this making any sense? What is the point, or rather, what do you get out of this by making these groundless allegations on Xinjiang? As a matter of fact, Verity has very close ties with the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour of the US State Departments. They have jointly developed a website on socially responsible purchasing and supply tools, which provides Xinjiang reports that basically form a feedback loop from the State Department to tarnish the reputation of Xinjiang. In fact, Verity provided assessment tools for reports in July 2020 on so-called Xinjiang supply chain, forced labour and other violations of human rights risk reports produced by the Xinjiang Supply Chain Business Advisory under the US State Department. What on earth does this website do? Well, it wants to define which manufacturers abide by the so-called human rights rules, just like how the WWF and the BCI decided which beans and cottons are environmentally friendly and allowed for member companies to import from, barring all the rest. The implication of this can be huge. They can find a random excuse and charge people for getting a verification, and likewise urge members to boycott certain merchants. Once these rules are established and recognized, certain countries will have an open excuse to restrict free trade from and to other countries. In the visible risk section of this website, China is labelled as where state-sponsored forced labour increasingly prevalent and intensifying. Chilling thoughts if you realise that the US has been pushing for a so-called rule-based international order. Just as the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and the Labour of the US refused to publish the list of fund receivers, Verity also kept its mouth shut on China-related projects in the past few years. Definitely a coincidence. So basically, both Verity, which claims they really care about labour rights, as well as the BCI, of whom caring deeply for socially responsible cotton trade, are essentially funded by the US State Department. This ultimately makes them American mouthpiece, conducting ideological propaganda to the rest of the world, with the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and the Labour of the US on the left, and the US Agency for International Development on the right. They all combine to act like this behind-the-scene funders to many lovely-sounding NGOs, and through them, getting their propaganda message far and wide in every single country on earth. It is now clear to draw a conclusion that the US State Department has a strong desire to intervene in China's Xinjiang region, since they don't exactly want their hands dirty in this funny business of interfering in a sovereign country in an explicit manner. They chose to hide behind the back of some obscure Sunday NGOs, Verity and the BCI, to produce a damning report slandering Xinjiang cottons, forcing international companies to take sides, and ultimately choke off China's cotton and textile industries that has been vital to the Xinjiang local economy. This is such a good case of ideological penetration by the US State Department, and it did once again remind me the potential power these innocent-sounding NGOs have, and once they move together in tandem, churning out the same damning reports can cause a sudden and colossal damage, whether it's economical or social, to their target countries on a level that is quite unbelievable, I must admit. From the last century, Western countries led by the US have meticulously taken careful planning on how to take action to deal with the Xinjiang region through the lens of geopolitics. During the Cold War, British scholar Bernard Lewis put forward a theory of arc of crisis in order to ultimately disintegrate the Soviet Union. Furthermore, the US also undertook the famous Operation Cyclone, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to $630 million per year between 1979 to 1989, only to arm and finance Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which was in contention with the USSR at the time. The main backers of the projects were CIA, MI6 and ISI. On a fun note, one of them turned against the US and ultimately started a full-on retaliation against the US. This hero/terrorist name? Osama bin Laden. If the Cold War has hindered the West's ability to fully intervene in Xinjiang's affairs, aka caring for your human rights and well-beings, China received the full attention of the collapse of the USSR. Using Xinjiang as leverage, actively and openly support separatists and even terrorist forces within China. This was further backed up by a CIA proposal back in 2003 titled "The United States should not rule out the option to play the weaker card as a means to exerting pressure on China in the event of some future crisis or confrontation." In fact, this is exactly what they've been doing. One metric is rather telling. Since 2004, the NED has financed $8.76 million of aid to the aforementioned separatist and terrorist groups. Lovely charity work. They certainly don't appear to be ashamed of their actions when they shamelessly bragged about their past successes. One former FBI interpreter has pointed out the key to destabilizing Xinjiang, playing the race and human rights card. She said, I quote, "We just tell them in Xinjiang that the ethnic minority groups don't have their own land, and we're here to help them. We tell them they're under suppression because the Chinese are slaughtering and torturing them. The US plan is to duplicate tactics used in Afghanistan, Ukraine and Iraq, creating problems out of nowhere and fully utilizing them. They have been explicitly expressed that we don't care about people. People are not on our radar unless they can be used and capitalized in order to achieve our goals. How can you expect them to really care about human rights if they don't respect people in the first place?" Perhaps the real chain of events I uncovered might sound cruel to a lot of you, but remember, this is the standard mode of operandi by certain Western countries. Some of these cold-blooded and insidiously clandestine propaganda methods used by them are beyond our wildest imagination. Sometimes I wonder if or how wide an audience my voice could reach, or what kind of threats I might face should I go against the mainstream propaganda media in the West. Regardless, I would be rather pleased if just one more person walk away from watching my video thinking to themselves that this ongoing propaganda war has started a long time ago and these innocent-sounding nasty NGOs often do the most damage. Do what you can, speak up if you can, generate a little heat, emit a little light, like a firefly flickering in the dark. There is no need to wait for the torch.